right, everybody, this is Gaming Gaiden, the podcast that uncovers the side stories of the gaming world as well as the world of Japanese localization. I am Mike, and here with me is Andrew, as usual.
Hey, everybody, how's it going?
Andrew, why don't you tell the folks who it is we're interviewing today?
Okay, today we're interviewing Dino. We can call you Oni Dino as well, right? That's your Twitter handle?
That's fine too.
Okay. All right, interviewing Oni Dino. Thanks for coming on, Dino.
Thank you for having me.
All right,
And let's go ahead with the introductions.
I was going to let the folks know what Dino has worked on. We've got the Kokoro Clover series and Variable Barricade. Dino has worked with Nintendo, the Pokemon Company, Platinum Games, Koei Tecmo, Gust, Capcom, Sega, Square Enix, Yacht Club Games, NIS America, White Owls Inc., Retro Gamer, Bandai Namco, TT Games, THQ Nordic, Bethesda, Konami, Furyu, Gung Ho Online Entertainment, Level 5, and has also done translation work for some YouTubers like Thor High Heels, Matt McMuscles, and Zeltic. And I also checked out some of this video. Dino worked on the translation for the Asobu Indie Showcase 2022. Well, that's a nice one to add to the resume. I like that.
I was surprised you read out all of that, actually.
We gotta let the folks know, you know?
Yeah.
I should also mention, I'm sorry to interrupt.
You got them from every angle.
Yeah, I guess so. That also includes some of my journalist work, my games journalist work as well, for translation and stuff too.
So additional angles in addition to the additional angles. Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
That's actually where I first saw your name come up. Was I used to read? I do read Silicon Era regularly.
Oh,
so.
Okay, nice.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's some more credits that cannot be divulged at this time, but we'll find out someday. So welcome to the show, Dino.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. I heard that this was a localization focused podcast, and yeah, it's just a really great thing. Not a lot of people talk enough about it in terms that gets it out to the average Joe.
Yeah, it's definitely a subject that I felt warranted some attention. Yeah, we both agreed on that, obviously. So we saw that there's been a lot of talk lately, and I'd been following a lot of translators on Twitter, and I felt like this is something people need to really learn about. I think people are curious, but they don't even know what questions they need to ask or what they want to know.
Yeah.
So,
thank you.
All right. So let's get started here. Let's start off with the big one. So Dino, what got you into Japan in the first place, and the Japanese language? How did you get started with all of this?
Yeah. Gosh, I get everybody gets that kind of question if they speak another language or they're working with a culture. I don't really have a very specific angle to it. I guess my father was a history teacher before I was born. And so he always was watching the History Channel and talking about cultures and stuff like that. So I probably picked it up a little bit from him in that way. And also through video games, just loving video games. I don't know exactly what it was, just the magic, of the medium, and having played video games since I was very little. Eventually you play a video game that makes you realize, oh, this is made in Japan, or, you pick it up from there.
Do you remember what that game was for you?
God, I don't think that it was really one specific instance, but if anything, I would have to say it was one of the earlier Final Fantasies, like Final Fantasy IV on the Super Nintendo.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's got to be responsible for so many people getting into Japan, I think.
Yeah,
the Final Fantasy series in the 90s especially.
Yeah. There's a whole bunch of non-Japanese people that now speak Japanese because of 30 years ago.
Yes.
Square 30 years ago.
Yes. Something happened, something special in the 90s.
It definitely was it is generally regarded as the golden era, and with good reason, I would say.
Yeah.
All right. So where are you from originally?
I'm originally from the Chicagoland area.
Okay.
All right.
Cool.
So did you spend any time outside of that area growing up, or did you stay there for your early years through college, things like that?
I mostly stayed there, traveled to visit friends and stuff, of course, and did extended stays of 3 months or something like that. I did, when I was in university in Chicago, study abroad in Japan. And I went to, I can say it. I went to Aoyama Gakuin University, which is in Tokyo. And I was there for a year, had just an amazing, amazing time, meeting so many different people from all over the world, having this enormous metropolis to be my playground, and the fun of studying abroad when you are learning another language in a country that is very focused on their mother tongue is anything you do, even if you're just partying or going out with your friends, you're studying. You're practicing your speaking, you're practicing your listening. So there's just there was no downtime whatsoever. I was just constantly go go go. I'm more of an introvert really than anything, but during that period of my life, I was so extroverted. I was constantly doing things. I like never played video games just because I wasn't home.
Oh, wow.
Which is wild to think of right now just because I'm constantly gaming. But Tokyo was wonderful. Just an amazing city. I fell in love with the city itself, in addition to, Japanese culture and people and stuff.
Yeah. No, that's great. So you had... How was your program at university? So obviously it's a great thing that they had a study abroad element, but how did you find the classes to be when you were in Chicago? I can't remember what university you said other than Aoyama Gakuin.
Yes. So my university in Chicago was called North Central College. So technically a college. I don't actually know what the difference is between, I guess, size, is it maybe?
Traditionally, the difference between college and university is what level of degrees they offer. College generally maxes out at the bachelor's level, and a university goes beyond to master's, potentially PhD.
Okay. Thank you.
No.
Learning
and community college usually maxes out at an associate's degree. Right, so for those who might be wondering, why am I able to rattle all this off? I've been a teacher for many years. I'm generally a high school English ESL teacher.
Okay, cool. So. So what was your question? I'm sorry.
we didn't know what school you went to, and we were curious. I was curious about the program there. So obviously, our study abroad program is going to be extremely helpful. But how were the classes you found back at North Central College?
Yeah, they were really great. It was a small college. It was like a private one, which I don't know, doesn't really. You can get into it. Anybody, if I got into it, the average person can get into it. I really loved their Japanese program. There was not too many people in it. Initially, if you take a language class, especially Japanese, just because like the culture of Japan is like the patron saint of the internet. So you get a lot of people who are, they're interested in Japan and, God love them, they want to learn the language and stuff, and it's really cool. But by Japanese, like after Japanese 101, there will be tons of people who drop out because they're like, oh, this is really hard. Like I just was doing this for fun, but it turns out it's a college course, But anyway, after like Japanese 101, there was not too many people. So there was only, I think, like one class, maybe two classes at the same level. So you always knew your people as you went throughout the 4 years of university. And it was just a nice, small, put together group. And, as years went on, you would lose a few people here or there. They only were doing it for 2 years, or they only did whatever, minor maybe instead of a major or something. But you still kept in contact with that, and there was just a great international community for such a small school. And the program that they had as well, getting a car outside. I'm sorry for the background noise. It's very hot right now. It's like mid 90s. I gotta have the window open.
No worries.
No problem.
So that's cool. You said you had a nice international community there, which is somewhat unusual for a small school.
Yeah, from all over. They had a great exchange program with so many different schools throughout the world. So you met so many different people there. And then the programs that they chose, they were like apparently quite selective, because the program that they chose for at least my university in Japan, it was not one of those courses where it's like, okay, come on over, foreign exchange students, and here is the short list of classes that you can take, and here is the one building that you'll be in, and here is like the dorms that you're going to be in. Like, it wasn't a curated experience. You could take absolutely any course in the entire university. So I really challenged myself and took like Chinese law courses, which were taught in Japanese while I was there, just to like, you know, because I don't know.
That's really impressive. They really show a lot of faith in the students. You know, it's cool.
Yeah. They also had like this like trial period of like the first week of courses where like you could just take so many different classes, and if you didn't like them, then you know you left, and that was okay as long as you met your credit amount. But you just could try out so many things, and yeah, it was such a good experience. Like if there's any young people who are listening, I can't stress enough just how good a study abroad is. You know, throw it into your horrible loans that you're going to be paying off for the rest of your life. Well, if you're American.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Wow.
Or if your school, if your state has a good public university system, though, you can save a fair amount of money with that.
Yes, I should have gone to a public university. I don't know why I chose I guess just because they had Japanese. I didn't really think that hard about it.
I mean, what high school senior is generally like, oh, well, let's look at the financials here.
Yeah, exactly.
So, all right, let's talk a little bit about your nitty-gritty bits of learning the language. Was there anything that you found particularly difficult about it? I know, obviously, there's going to be a drop-off for the 101 folks, but what continued to challenge you through the years or even today?
Oh, gosh. You know, when I was younger, I shouldn't be drinking a carbonated beverage right now. I feel burpy. It's terrible. Why am I doing this? When I was younger, like before university, I just always had a like proclivity for languages, and I was always studying a little bit of this here, a little bit of that there. So I picked up enough Japanese that 101 was a real breeze to me. I already learned the writing system, just hiragana and katakana, and so none of that was particularly challenging. I loved kanji, the Chinese characters that Japanese uses, and I guess initially just because the grammar structure is so different from Japanese to English that when you go to speak, like, you know what you want to say, but you have to say it backwards in Japanese versus English to oversimplify. Yeah. And so trying to express yourself, even though you know the words, was really hard. And it didn't click until maybe 2 years in for me to just flow and just have a conversation without thinking first. So I suppose that would be my answer.
Yeah. That's not unusual, especially amongst the introverted folks. Yeah, definitely. Like when I was a lot younger, like in high school and stuff, I also had like really bad acne, which just only inhibited more. You know, you don't even want to be in front of people. So that was a real challenge, honestly, more so than the language itself, because I knew I wanted to speak it. I knew I wanted to do all these different things, but the social parts were more trouble. The language was a breeze after I fixed my acne. It's definitely something, you know, as someone who has worked with high schoolers mostly, I can see like there's just so much going on of trying to become who it is that you think you want to be at that time. Yeah. And to learn a foreign language on top of it in your teenage years is really difficult. And I work with an ESL population. So like I understand that all of a sudden their identities are just completely compromised and they don't know how to say the most basic thing all of a sudden. And it's a very humbling experience. Yeah.
And you're so awkward, and like not even just physically, but you know, mentally your brain's still developing, making the folds in your brain, you know, like it's just a terrible time.
But if there's anybody out there listening and you're hesitant or whatever, also know that the younger you are, the more effective the language instruction will be. That's not to say you can't learn later, but the younger you are, the better it is.
Definitely. Yeah. Right. I mean, Noam Chomsky says something about it needing to be before puberty, but to get absolute, an absolute hold of the language to be, I guess, native, because fluent is native and native would be different, I think.
Yeah.
I would say though that's not really a hard line though. If you have such aptitude for it, you know, you can still become fluent in a language. It will be a bit more of an upward battle for people who are older, but it's not impossible by any means. Don't let that stop you.
Yeah.
Plus, I feel some of the studies on it are probably not great because there's not many people older, like past 35 or whatever, trying to learn a language. It's usually people that are college age or younger that are really setting out and trying it real hard, you know? So, yeah.
There's genuinely very little we actually know about the brain and how it functions because
that is true.
It's pretty unethical to test most things on the brain. So
unethical, yes.
There's not a lot that we can get. It's like most of what we learn about its development comes from traumatic brain injuries.
That's true. Dino, so you felt that you were the best at kanji. That was like what you were best at least at first.
Yeah, I guess at first, just because I mean, lots of people have such trouble with it, and I picked it up quite quickly. Yeah,
that was the easiest part for me in a lot of ways because I remember when I was a kid, I was naturally good at spelling, and that was like English was my best subject, at least for a time. And I really feel like the spelling, I mean, I was in spelling bees and stuff, and I feel like that transferred over into kanji. So I never had too much of an issue there. Mike, did you have I don't think we ever talked about this. Did you have like a part of Japanese you liked the most? Reading, writing, listening?
I find kanji to be insanely difficult. I do have a great deal of trouble with it. I started in 2001 and I bought a book for elementary school kids and just kind of went through grade 1, grade 2. And I think I stopped somewhere around like 250. And it was enough to get me by because I spent most of my time just living, running around, doing whatever. And here I am 21 years later doing like wani kani, being like, man, I keep screwing up this kanji. It's like the other one. So it's funny because even though I find it to be the most difficult, I also find that once I unlock that kanji, it just makes everything so much easier. I tried to play Phantasy Star, the first Phantasy Star, on in Japanese. And it was like all in hiragana and then katakana. And I was like, I can't read this. My God, please give me a kanji so I know what we're talking about.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
It's so annoying, man. So if you get like an emulated version or an earlier version, Phantasy Star 1 is like katakana only, which is the most annoying. But if you're learning, that's great. Do not let us stop you on that. But the Switch version, they do switch it to hiragana at least, which is preferable to katakana.
Nice.
Right, so I was playing the Switch Sega Ages release.
Yes,
I tried it and I was like, I don't think I can do this. I don't think I can do this in hiragana.
I don't know how you guys feel about RPGs, Dino, but like I didn't get into them too much until recently. By that I mean the past 5 years or so, especially after I beat Breath of the Wild, and then I got into Phantasy Star and I played the fourth one first. Because that was cool. I don't know why I did that, but that was one of the best RPGs experiences I've ever had in my life. And then I got insanely addicted to the first Phantasy Star as well. You guys have played all of these, or?
I never beat one, but I played them.
Okay. I loved it for some reason.
I'm the same though as I've played them, but haven't beaten them. I'm huge into RPGs though, to answer your question.
Okay. Okay. Cool. Yeah. I'm getting more and more into them. Plus, it's great study. So that was the only time you lived in Japan, was for Aoyama Gakuin?
I also went back several years after that to do some more like short-term studying stuff, like 3 to 6 months stuff. So then collectively, I would say it's been a little over 2 years. Yeah, collectively.
Okay.
That's
all right.
That's nice. I spent 3 years there and I'm, I spent 3 years there. I'm over 40 now.
Totally spoke Japanese and everything. This is wonderful.
I don't know if totally spoke Japanese is really an appropriate phrasing for that. I very solidly sit on the intermediate plateau. That's generally where I am. And I think the fact that I am a very weak language student is what really informs my teaching as an English teacher. Because I understand the difficulties
That's good
Be
though.
better than me.
Yeah.
Playing to your
But that's-
strengths.
It's part of the reason that I
yeah.
started getting back into studying Japanese again later in life was like I found that I felt too distant at times from the experience of the students. And I was like, I need to empathize. I got to put myself back in that situation, feel the humility of it all, and know
That's
what
great.
it's like to be going up the sheer face of something, just
yeah.
hoping I'm not going to fall right off.
When I
So yeah.
lived in Japan, I didn't know anything when I first got there, just greetings probably. And then, probably after the first year, well, no. I mean, I started studying pretty hardcore immediately, and I just wanted to understand what was going on around me, because it was actually after the honeymoon phase of living in Japan, it was driving me crazy. So I kind of, in some sense, I studied real frantically. I really, really wanted to level up quite quickly. And I think it's just because of the immersion, but like after a year, I feel like that was like 4 years of college, dude. Like, because the way I was studying as well, and I've never taken a college course in Japanese. I don't know what I'm talking about, but it was like 0 to 60 real quick. And anybody that has done immersion and knows that, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I would say if I had put even half as much effort when I was there as I have been recently, then I would be so great at it. Because at the time, like, you just kind of absorb things because you're living life. This is what I'm seeing every day. It's natural language acquisition as opposed to studying.
Yeah.
Oh, that's true.
So,
I mean, there's that guy, Matt versus Japan or whatever, that says he just listened to only Japanese for like a month or two. I don't think he's for some extended amount of time, like, went kind of crazy with it, but kind of acquired Japanese in that way. And there was some blog, I don't know if you remember this, Mike. I think we might be a little bit older than you, Dino. I'm not sure, but there was some blog back in the day when we lived in Japan. It was a black dude from America, and he was talking about, like, I think he was talking about, like, the African way of acquiring a language acquisition, which is just speak, just listen. Like, Africa's the most multilingual continent, more than Europe, and there's been, like, some studies on how. I mean, I suppose it depends on what area in Africa, but it seems to be kind of across the continent that, for whatever reason, they seem to be able to kind of really acquire language pretty easily. So
they've got strong oral traditions, right? The griot is an African tradition, right? So storytelling, it's a rich history, regardless of written or not.
It's like an average of 4 languages. You got 2 tribal languages, local languages, and then English and French generally. I find that fascinating.
Yeah, I didn't know all about this, but this is making sense. Just because, like, when you say you scroll over the country or something like that online and you see what languages are spoken in the country, and it's like 5 or 6 languages that are the primary ones.
The primary ones,
There's other ones as well. Yes.
America doesn't even have an official language. Right? We've got a de facto language. It's just like, look, all our laws are in this language, so, like, we're gonna go with that. But we could just as easily claim more than one official language, and I think it's probably past time we did that. We should go ahead and declare more than one to be an official.
Franklin wanted German to be the language of America.
Yeah,
I can't believe it. That would be, and he wanted the turkey. Wait, not the turkey.
I think you're right. The turkey to be the national bird.
National bird, or no, the peacock. I think the peacock.
Oh, I don't know. I thought it was the turkey, but it could have been the peacock. I don't know.
Maybe. I don't know. Correct us in the comments, please. But yeah.
Either way, somehow both seem appropriate for America's current image.
I know. He was kind of hefty too, Franklin. So maybe he was kind of saw where America was headed.
He might have related to the turkey.
Yes. He slept a lot as well.
So, Dino, I want to go back to this you mentioned before, Final Fantasy IV. Like, what games did you grow up playing other than Final Fantasy IV?
Lots of Nintendo games, just because the consoles that we had were NES and Super NES. And I was young because I'm 34. So
we're almost the same age then.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And so I had an older sister. She's 9 years older than me. So they bought the NES for her around the time I was born, probably. So I didn't think of like renting video games or anything. Like we just had 5 games or something, and those were the games. I never even thought of, I'm too young to think of that. So we just had like Mario 2, Mario 3, and a horrible Simpsons game that I really hated. You played as Bart. You had like a little spray
Space
can.
Mutants one.
I think so.
Yeah,
I feel like the aliens were a part of it.
I had this game. Yeah, it was tough, and the controls were stiff.
I could never get past the first stage. Like I didn't know what I was doing. So I constantly played the first 3 Mario games, Super Mario Brothers games, and Mario 2 really stuck with me just because you could go to so many different worlds and play the game from start to end so many different ways. You could skip worlds entirely. Like that was in the first one and the third one, but for whatever reason, the second one just felt more unique. I guess just because it was
having the control of 4 different characters is definitely a major factor.
That's true too. I loved playing as Toad and Peach. When I was a kid.
Peach was who I'd like to play as.
Yeah, because she could float. That was the best.
Yeah.
Right.
Let's put this on easy mode.
Yeah. I made it better. Yeah.
Right, and then when I got a little bit older, I wanted a Super Nintendo, and I don't know exactly what year it was. It must have been the year after the Super Nintendo came out, because I wanted it for Christmas. And I remember my parents, who they divorced when I was young, and I think they might have divorced that same year because I was living with my ma. She was telling me like, sometimes Santa forgets a present at the bottom of his bag and then he has to come back and deliver it later. I'm like, okay, yeah, whatever. This was leading up to the Christmas. And then Christmas came. I didn't get the Super Nintendo. I was really sad. And then my mom was like, but don't you remember what I told you? Like, sometimes Santa forgets a present. And I was like, no, you forgot about me, not the present. So then in walks my next door neighbor, and he's dressed as Santa, and I think it's Santa. And he's like, oh, I forgot the present. And he gives me a Super Nintendo, and I was like really polite and timid and quiet. But afterwards, I was just like, I was the Nintendo 64 kid, that meme of like, he picks the thing apart. He's like, Super Nintendo. No, he says, Nintendo 64. And he like looks like a demon. But I was basically that for the Super Nintendo. So
yeah, definitely.
When I got that, because that started to become such a JRPG era, I was playing JRPGs just because I would go to the rental store and rent things based on the box art. Even I didn't know what an RPG was, so I just picked it because I liked the art or whatever. Yeah. And I loved reading when I was a kid. I always loved it, so I never had any trouble being like, oh my god, there's so much text or something. And I just played all the Final Fantasies. Well, I guess when I say all, there was only 2 on the Super Nintendo, right? There was 4.
Well, there was
6.
There was Mystic Quest as well.
Oh, right. Yeah, I never rented that one. I think because I didn't like the box art.
It was mostly the box art. I think was pretty representative of the game's experience, and that it was somewhat generic.
And that's the only one I had, so that turned me off to RPGs for a long time.
Oh, geez.
But the box art on Final Fantasy 2 and 3, I think, were just the logo with purple or red.
With the Moogle, though. The Moogle is so cute that I was like, what is it? And I had to get it. So you look at the back of the box then. And then the back of the box looks much more entertaining. But I love that Moogle. That's my favorite iteration of the Moogle. Is when they look the best when they look like little tiny bears, in my opinion. Not bulbous, gross versions of themselves that they sometimes look like. But besides those 2, Chrono Trigger, Super Mario RPG, I gravitated to long form stories.
Okay. Do you feel like you were able to, you were able to tell that this was coming from another culture at some point when you were a kid?
Yeah, I never thought about like that kind of concept, but I knew it felt so very different than what I usually saw. And I suppose, I was watching Power Rangers at the time too. I was really into Power Rangers. And that's when it started to click. Like, I think maybe I heard on the playground that, Power Rangers is actually a Japanese show, and then they changed it to, turn it into like an American show or whatever.
Yeah.
And then that's when the gears started working with like video games and stuff too, because I think it was more so I could always tell when I played a game that was not Japanese, just because I was used to the Japanese game structure, game design, like maybe in like map design or something on a Super Nintendo game, you might be like, oh, well, this looks like a little alcove over here. I bet if I go over there, there's a treasure. And like almost 100% of the time it's there, right? Yeah. But when playing like a Western made game that was on a Super Nintendo, which were few and far between, but sometimes you would come across one, it just looked different. It felt different. And then that's when I started to realize, oh, sometimes there's games from America instead of being like, oh, these games are from Japan. No, sometimes these games are from America, and something like that. So it's backwards, really. I
try to tell people, especially at that time in the early 90s especially, Atari was not in the picture, and Microsoft had not yet released the Xbox. So you have, for a long time, at least as being a kid, it's Sega and Nintendo only, and then Sony comes in. They're all Japanese, and a lot, like overwhelming amount of the software is Japanese, and that was our gaming experience as kids. American games almost felt rare for a while in America,
Absolutely.
And I remember, I think at first I probably didn't know that they were from Japan, but I think when I started watching anime, I realized, I knew that I knew immediately like that was a Japanese cartoon. And then I started to realize my game system's from Japan. Mr. Miyagi is from Japan in Karate Kid. Ninjas are also Japanese. That's when I started. And Power Rangers too. I was into Power Rangers as well. Like it did kind of start to feel kind of overwhelming, like how much of everything I was liking was coming from one place. But yeah. And another thing is like on like the Nintendo consoles, it would say made in Japan, right? Like the hardware or something. So I'm sure that that's probably where I picked it up too, because I was just always reading everything. Even when I was like eating cereal in the morning, I was reading the boxes and reading the nutrition facts. Fascinating stuff for a 7-year-old.
So I'm a little bit older than you guys.
Okay. Not by much.
And not by too much, but
I can see your walker in the background there.
I'm 42. So like I was growing up through the 80s, and I was maybe a little more cognizant of things that were going on in like the news and stuff, because I would hear it, with my family watching the news, or they talk about something in the paper. And I was a little bit, I was made aware of the sort of Japanophobia that was going on. There was a lot of fear because Japan was becoming this economic power, and there's still this weird, constant bitterness over World War II and stuff of like, oh my God, they're going to take over now. Their cars are selling well. They're not making bad cars anymore. And now what's this with the video games? And like you would see the evening news would be advertised with a commercial. It's like, this new game system from Japan is taking over your children. Tune in at 6 p.m., So like I did have somewhat of a sense of that, but it wasn't, for me, it was more the real joy of everything, recognizing it was coming from Japan, sort of came in my high school years when I was like, okay, so wait a second. We got Godzilla, we got Speed Racer, we got all these video games, and ninjas and samurai. Like, yo, I gotta go check this place out.
Started to slowly dawn on you.
It was, because when I was in high school, it was a boarding school. So I got to meet people from a lot of different countries, and that really made the big difference, because now I had somebody to talk to be like, hey, I really like this cool stuff from Japan.
Yeah.
And I had a friend she went home for like a winter vacation, brought me back an Ultraman figure, that kind of thing.
Oh, that's awesome.
Goes a long way, because back then there just wasn't a lot here. This is before Pokemon and all that stuff, just like opened the floodgates.
Back in the day, this is getting into old man talk at this point, I feel like, but whenever we would import a video game or an anime or whatever it was, it really felt like before eBay and everything, it really felt like this is a trinket from heaven. Like this is
yeah,
this
it was like a real
such,
special little thing.
yeah, so special. Like this is so hard to come by. I don't know anybody else that has this.
Yeah.
You know, it feels like, I mean, it's great you can get whatever you want now, but it is just so, you know, it's just too it's kind of too easy at the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Your
which is fine.
appreciation for it kind of, it's a little watered down maybe.
Yeah, there was again, it was just a special time, man. It was such a special time. But anyway, let's move on to the next section, which is about Japanese English localization.
So, localization is of course a huge umbrella of many different things. Sorry, I'm using my hands a lot, but like Kirby, my background is so aggressive, it's eating my hands, and
That's okay.
it's also
That is
eating
what
my
Kirby
head.
does. That's fair.
Yeah.
Apologies to the people who are listening audio only. Anyway, so localization is this big umbrella, and it involves so many different things. And translation is just one facet of that, where translation is just taking the text from its source language and changing it to the target language. And in my opinion, you can't have one without the other, because languages are intrinsically linked to culture. That's why American English versus British English is a specific and separate skill that will require different people, because it's the same language, but different enough that it needs to be a cultural thing, a localization thing. So anyway, that's what localization. That's one facet of localization. Excuse me, and localization will include the writing, the speaking for video games, timing, the voice acting, accents, jargon, style guidelines. Like there's so many different parts. So when you say I work in localization, that is a broad description versus I'm a translator, which is much more specific.
You wouldn't say you were a localizer for localization is probably a term not used in technical translation too much, I would imagine.
Correct, because technical translation would be a specified skill.
Right, and it's probably less cultural implications when you're talking about lug nuts or whatever it is on a car or whatever.
Right. You would want to use the correct jargon specifically in technical translation. So it is important to know your audience, whether it's going to be, translated for the mechanics or whether it's customer facing. And also, is that in customer facing in America or customer facing in, British Isles or something? Because like, for example, what we would, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong. I haven't done technical translation for this stuff. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe a spanner in British English and even in Irish English is for a wrench, a specific type of wrench. Yeah. So we wouldn't call it a spanner here, but that's an example of localization. That's why you can't have one without the other.
My favorite is torch, which is flashlight.
Yes.
They call it a torch in the British Isles, which for Americans, that torch just feels like you're going through a pyramid.
Yes, medieval or pyramid or Indiana Jones or some shit.
It's not again, just from American perspective. It's just that a torch doesn't feel like it's an electronic thing at all. But that's what it is.
I do remember coming across those differences though in video games when I was much younger, because sometimes it would get localized and like there was never, if it got localized in English at all, there was never going to be a British English versus an American English or something like that. So sometimes you would get words like that. Or in the case of Pokemon, they had such strict character limits. I'm sure this is the reason, I have to assume, that they chose the word lift over elevator. The word
sense.
lift never felt weird to me, probably just because I had always heard it so much. I remember very specifically too, having trouble with spellings, because I would use British spelling sometimes because for whatever reason the game I was playing was using British spelling. So I was like, wait, I thought there's an extra U in favorite, or I thought defense was spelled with a C, not an S. And coming across that kind of stuff in school.
It's funny, I still encounter issues with that to this day. Growing up, I read a lot, and some of the greatest storytellers are British writers. So I read all these things, and then I would say like, well, what do you mean canceled is wrong? It's got two L's. Like, where are you coming from with this? And then I got to look it up, and they're like, chiefly British. I'm like, what are you talking about, chiefly British? I've been spelling it this way my whole life.
Yes. Words like that too are so important to pin down in writing style guidelines for like a big video game, like a big AAA JRPG, because they're technically like canceled with one L versus two L's. Like one is more common in America, but they're both accepted. So it's just really important to get that down, especially because like you'll have translators and editors, localizers from all over the world, you know, writing American English. But
so yeah, you said you have people who are speakers of English, but they're working all around the world, and so they may have influence from different varieties of English.
Yes. So even though they know that they're supposed to be writing in American English, they won't think of certain things like, oh, should I spell traveler with one L or two L's? You know, that kind of thing. And yeah.
So I'm curious about your process. Now, have you been working freelance or in-house for anyone, or have you done both?
I have been working freelance.
Okay.
It definitely in-house versus freelance is a totally different experience.
So what does your experience generally look like as a freelance translator?
So I will either freelance directly with the clients, which would be, you know, the publishers usually, or the developers, or I will freelance through a third-party agency to whom the developer or publisher of the video game will sort of outsource the localization process to, you know, this other company that then handles everything for them, including marketing usually. So yes, does that answer your question?
Well, look, I'm curious now about some of the details of it. So you work directly with a client. What are they giving you to work with?
Oh boy. So it is so different from project to project when working freelance. Sometimes you get next to no communication between you and the developers or the writers. So you have such a hard time getting your questions answered. And as other times you do have connections, but they will not answer your question for another 4 weeks. And it's like, well, I have a deadline in 3 days. So can you get back to me about whether this NPC is male or female, or, you know, something like that. Just inane things that people who don't work in localization will never consider. So it usually doesn't show up in the materials that they give you ahead of time. But ideally, a project, especially a huge project like a AAA JRPG, will give you the history of the series, the entire like glossary of like items that were used in past entries, past character names, or certain references, like say there's a Skywalker name or something like that. Then like if this name pops up, it must be localized as this specific spelling. Or like a lot of times you get marketing requests where it's like, yes, we know that the spelling for this word is actually A, but for marketing purposes, we must always go with B. So, you know, because they've been making figures or they've been printing the names on backpacks or purses or something like that. Can't change that name at all.
Yeah.
You know?
Okay.
So you'll get a huge laundry list of that kind of stuff, and style guidelines as well, like single quotes or double quotes, smart quotes or simple quotes, that kind of stuff. You will also get, on the more technical side of things, the descriptions of tags or how to handle emphasis. Like, should you bold the word? Should you, are we not able to use bold and italics? Should you italicize? Do you actually need to add an extra word? Like, this is very dangerous versus this is bold text dangerous. And how to use those tags, all sorts of stylistic differences that you must always consider between projects.
Now you're describing the ideal situation if they give you all that information.
Yeah.
But they don't always give you all that information.
Nope. Yeah. Sometimes you got to do what's right, or not do what's right. You got to do what makes the most sense and what you think is right. And if you're on a big team, then, you know, somebody needs to take charge and be the person that calls the shots, because if ultimately the client wanted it changed, sometimes it's an easier change to make, so long as everything is unified. Because sometimes, like say in American English, we don't use single quotes to use like well, they said go to the store. The go to the store part would be double quotes in American English, but in British English it would be single quotes. But say we all just said whatever, we're all using single quotes, so it's technically wrong by style guideline in that regard. But as long as it's uniform, as long as it's not all over the place and people are just spelling favorite with only an O and sometimes an OU, just as long as it's uniform, that is the most important thing. So as long as you make that call, you stay in communication with the whole team, and you have somebody that is driving those things in a project management sense, that is most important in my opinion.
All right. So is there anything in addition to that you would like people to know about localization, the experience and the process that you think maybe they don't know, and this would be good to have some insight into?
Yeah. Gosh, I mean, there's so much. Like there will be so many times that I'm in the thick of it in work during the day, and I am thinking, God, I wish the fans would know this or know that or something about whatever. I guess ultimately I would say that, like, if there's a change in the game, or if they didn't say the exact same thing in this line, there's I wouldn't even say usually, like 99% of the time there is a reason for that. Like whether it's a timing issue, like if it's a voiced line, then if you say yoroshiku in Japanese, that's a short little thing, half a second, right? What are you going to say in English in a half second that carries that scene, but maybe is not exactly yoroshiku in Japanese? So you have to constantly.
And what even is exactly yoroshiku?
Yes, right. That's a great word, because it's so loaded with so many different things, right? Like when does yoroshiku show up in the conversation? Otherwise, I'll translate it a million different ways.
Yeah.
So yeah, if there's a change, there's a reason for it. Like whether it's timing, whether it is a matching wave files, sometimes in voiced dialogue, the characters are modeled to be speaking with the original dialogue, which is Japanese. So sometimes the lip flaps will not change. Thankfully, this is changing a little bit as development goes on, but the lip flaps won't change, which means that you either need to completely throw that out the window in the English localization, and their characters are just, sounds are coming out of their mouths and their mouths are closed, or you must match the lip flaps to the wave file. So you can only have your character speak in like a staccato way or something. It's not ideal. Yeah. It really isn't. That's why I'm glad that lip flap technology is getting better and better. But there are so many reasons, like maybe you can't fit it in this line because of text constraints if it's a text box. So that information has to go into the next text box if there even is one. There's just a million little decisions that you have to make, and it's always to try and make a great experience. So that's why I really want the fans to understand.
That's great. That's a great point with some great examples. Thank you.
Yeah.
Have you, since you've become a professional in this field, have you become a fan of other games' translations?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm always a fan of good writing in general, so I've always liked games. But since becoming a professional vocalizer, I have such an appreciation for how they creatively did this or creatively did that. I love my localization peers, all the people I haven't even met yet. There's just so many talented people working to problem solve for a really fun dialogue or monologue.
I mean, I remember even playing Mario Odyssey, which is not an RPG or anything. It's not like a lot of text, but I remember just thinking, man, translations come a long way. Because, I mean, the Mario games are always good, but something felt, I don't know, really good at that point. Like, I was coming from the 90s up until that point, really felt like they, I don't know. Yeah, just really good. Their in-house translation team at Nintendo is great. And, and then the Zelda translations, things like that. I mean, just wonderful. And the Dragon Quest XI's translation was superb. So I only played bits of that in English, but what I did play was amazing, translation wise, especially. So, yeah, it's interesting because like once you start going down this road, it's cool to develop the ability to have that appreciation.
Yeah, yeah.
Right?
It's great because now I look at like a Mario game or, one of those games that is very simple gameplay wise, but has, a few tutorials or a little bit of text. And there's just so much personality just like packed in all of those lines. If you have like they sometimes have Toad or Toadette as the tutorial person, they have the writing so colorful and there's just so much love in there. And I love those like Paper Mario games. Have you played like the most recent ones? They're
Not
just
the most recent.
They're
been a while
so
for me.
good. The localizations are fantastic in the two most recent ones, especially. Just I love it. I can't stop laughing out loud when I'm playing them.
I said this in another episode, and this is probably comes from George R. R. Martin. This was probably never translated from Japanese, but in Elden Ring, there's this location called the Cathedral of Dragon Communion. And I just felt like those are the best string of words I've ever heard in my life. I loved that.
Yeah. From what little I know about that game's localization, I think that it was primarily in Japanese. I don't think that there were too many. I mean, maybe some like proper nouns like location names and stuff. Maybe those were already determined, but
major story beats
was
maybe
from Japanese to English.
Right. Yeah. Well, if that's
maybe
incredible.
It was translation. Yeah.
If that was translated, incredible job. Would love to interview whoever did that one. Do you look up to any translators like Tim Rogers or Matt Alt or anybody like that?
God, yeah.
Wolsey?
Absolutely, yeah. Of course, all of those the old guard, that came well before me. I really look up to them and I look up to their work. Like, my God, I love the translations for like Tactics Ogre, Final Fantasy 12, Final Fantasy Tactics. Those are Vagrant Story. Like, it's so rich. The text is so rich and dense. Those are great examples. I look up to a lot of people who are in the modern era now too, that are just like my peers that I talk to, just because everybody has such a creative way of solving, the localization problem. Or I shouldn't say the localization. That sounds weird. Just the difficulties that come with translating, really.
Yes.
Writing fun, engaging dialogue. Like I said with Paper Mario, the Origami King, that was the name of the most recent one. I look up to absolutely everybody that worked on that game's localization. It's so good.
Yeah, I wish we could find out who worked on it, but Nintendo, again, is famously tight-lipped about these things.
Yeah, I mean, the names are in the credits. Nintendo always credits all their people, but you definitely cannot speak about your projects. With them for sure.
If Kirby could tell, he would.
If you get him drunk, maybe.
So
he looks like he's like trying to eat me, kind of, or this side.
I mean, that's how he does. That's how he communicates. What else has he got? That's just what he does. So
that's how he do.
I'm curious if you can address this sort of some of the differences in. This is a difference of culture, but about how otaku culture is manifested here in America versus how it appears in Japan.
Yeah, gosh, I'm not super well versed on otaku culture in general. It's just something that's always been in my periphery, but I've never like participated in really. I guess I've been on the sidelines, so to speak, just liking video games. But I was never too big into like anime or manga or things like that are much closer to the otaku-ness that we have in America. But it is a total different breed versus Japan. It's so interesting because it's basically like a language difference where it's like we're saying the same thing, but we're saying it two totally different ways, and we have different emphases in our sentences. And because I mean, say you both like My Hero Academia, but there's going to be different ways that you express it, and like what we do here in America with like anime conventions are so very different than conventions in Japan. I had my friends recently well, I shouldn't say recently, this was pre-pandemic. My friends visited.
That was the last time anything happened.
Yeah, right. And he's Japanese, and I took him to a convention just because like a convention was happening, and he was like, "Oh my god, this is crazy! Like, I you can't really find this in Japan, but it's weird because this is about Japanese stuff, but you can't find it there." And I don't know, you know, that's maybe just his personal experience, but it was cool to see him have that like reverse import of his own culture.
This subject fascinates me. We've talked about this a little bit with the other guests on the show. It's just the way nerd culture, otaku culture manifests itself in the two countries is totally different. And then there's the surrounding culture. There's just Japanese culture at large, and then the otaku culture being one part of that in Japan, and then the overall American culture, whatever that is, and then American otaku nerd culture being a part of that, and just those influencing that one area. But one of the differences too, I think, is that Americans really are. This is getting like into like maybe a deeper topic here, but really searching. It feels like they're really like about identity. They really want to show that I'm into this. Here's my shirt. I'm doing it right now with my Journey shirt. But I mean, I feel like that exists in Japan, but to a much lesser extent also.
Yeah, you know it's more like here's our subgroup in Japan versus here is me, the individual. You know, if you go to what is it, USJ, Universal Studios Japan in Osaka, you see small groups of people, whether it's 2 or whether it's 6, and they're all wearing the same costume because they're doing a group activity together. It's not so much the individual kind of thing. It's all about doing synchronized things.
Right.
And, having fun in the group, whether it's large or small. And
that was seemingly anyway, that was cosplay in Japan was something you did just within your circle. Maybe you did it in Yoyogi Park or something, but I mean, it seems like cosplay in America, at least in recent years, especially since the boom of San Diego Comic-Con, it's really just part and parcel of a convention. But the cosplay being married to a convention thing is a little bit less so in Japan, probably. I would imagine.
I can only assume so as well. I'm not familiar enough to say one way or another, but there is also something you mentioned made me think of like how in America as like the American culture we view nostalgia as well. I feel like it's the nostalgia has been like weaponized, for profit.
You can say against.
Starting with
it's
Gen
okay.
Xers all the way through millennials and through Zoomers and so on. But you got so many toys just heavily marketed to children from Gen X age through us and beyond. And I think that now as we are in our 30s and 40s, we're seeing it come around as well. And that's why there's such a huge proliferation of American otaku culture, because it's just part of the larger zeitgeist of loving the things that you grew up with and, being into the same things, and that's okay, versus, what, people in the baby boomer generation would say is like, you can't like these things anymore. You're X age, you crossed the gap. There's no more liking of Pokemon anymore, but that doesn't exist as a concept anymore with our age and especially younger. So I would love to see a huge cultural social science study on that.
I think that a lot of these people who complain about it need to go back and reevaluate their support of Ronald Reagan. This was, right?
Because
this whole thing is the result
nostalgia.
Of deregulation. Right.
It
says, you can make 30-minute commercials for toys. It's
right.
cool.
He's He was directly involved in that. That's right.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
Right. And I mean, if you look back, a lot of this is almost another topic, but yeah, the 80s American cartoons existed just to sell toys, which
I'm going to say
really
something
well.
that a lot of people will be upset by. I grew up with those 80s cartoons. They are trash. So many of them were trash.
I agree. I mean, if you look
those
at
toys, love the
toys.
toys. Toys were fantastic.
Yeah. Transformers, especially in my opinion.
The cartoons were not good, man.
Yeah,
like
there were
I
so
say
few
this
frames. Everything felt like a C team. You know,
the voices, like they were rough, you know, and you could tell like what was something with a little bit of love and care put into it versus what was just a commercial.
Yeah,
I can remember this was like 2000. This was the time that we were both in Japan, Andrew, around 2006 or so, and a lot of shows were coming on DVD and stuff. This is before streaming was standard. So I got hold of He-Man season 1. I loved He-Man. I still have a He-Man blanket that I had when I was like from 1983 or whatever.
Oh, that's very embarrassing.
No, I'm very proud of this. So I put in the DVD and I was like, this is terrible. I couldn't get through like 5 minutes of it, and I just turned it off. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna leave this in the past. It's all right, man.
leave it as a memory.
I still have that sense of love and adoration for He-Man and what it gave to me as a child. But like to look at it with an adult's critical sense is just like, oh wow, what is this?
Right. No, I mean, if you look at the 2012 Nickelodeon Ninja Turtles cartoon, it's about 1,000 times better than the one that we grew up with.
I haven't seen it, but or maybe I have. It might have been on that Fox 4 Kids block or whatever. That was sometimes I'd get up early enough on a Saturday morning and I could catch a little bit of Ultimate Muscle and something and be like, this is good fun. You know, the kids today are lucky. This is cool.
I feel like especially Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is constantly being remade. It's just always on. It's just whenever one ends, the other one begins. It's like a human centipede of TMNT.
I mean, this is part of the problem happening in America. We had such good stuff in the 80s up until like mid 90s, I guess, with Power Rangers. And then it kind of feels like ever since then, everything's just rehashed over and over and over in America, which is fine. That's the stuff I grew up with. But, you know, it's like this is partly, this kind of leads into our next question, actually. This is probably partly why Japan's soft power, as Matt Alt puts it, Japan's culture worldwide does really well because they don't reboot as much, probably. They don't... there's not like a lot of rehash. Like we had like G.I. Joe movies recently, Transformers, everything, all this stuff stemming from the 80s, except for Marvel, which goes back to, 60s or something, I guess, with Stan Lee's stuff. But I mean, God, other than that, it just feels like everything from our childhood has just been rehashed over and over. And there's been some good ones, but it's kind of feels like, where are the new American ideas, you know?
Yeah.
Where is it coming from? The kids
there,
in Barnes. If there's any kids in Barnes and Noble, they're not reading comics. They're reading manga. You know.
Yeah.
This is what's happening in America.
Those are both comics.
Well, you know what I mean. American comics or Japanese, English language originally Japanese manga. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Totally true. And that's because of weaponized nostalgia. Like Gen X started to, as they got older and were in the positions of making things, then that's when you're getting the reboots and the remakes and stuff. And it's only getting worse with millennials doing the same thing. Because I remember that. And like, I just want my children to play with my toys. And they can't play with their own toys. They have to play with my toys, Like, I don't have a child, but if I had one, I would be like, you should play Super Mario Bros. Like, just give that a try. Because it is good. It's going to be great. But I should really just let him play his Minecraft or whatever he wants to play,
Right. Yeah, my nephew's super into Fortnite and Roblox, like the rest of the kids his age.
Yeah,
and that's you know what? I guess those are new properties. I mean, I think Fortnite is Swedish originally, but anyway, yeah. It's at least, I don't know. It just feels like, as people that are in Japan, it's great. there's always something new coming from Japan. Jujutsu Kaisen recently or whatever. There's new properties all the time, and I feel like America just doesn't have that because of the rehash, the reboot culture. So, other than stuff we've discussed, do you think there's any other thing out there or is there any other reason that Japan has been just this successful in selling their pop culture worldwide?
Yeah, I really, of course, couldn't say the reason because there's so many reasons. It's a wonderful marketing campaign spanning decades. It's part of Japan being so isolated as its own society, its own culture, that ended up crafting. Sorry, there's an airplane.
It's fine.
We'll allow it.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
It ends up crafting its own unique identity, right? So even if you speak to people in Korea, which is the Japanese next door neighbor, right? That it is still such a totally different culture to Korean people compared to the rest of East Asia. It's just Japan is very much isolated itself for better or worse, and in terms of an exportable product that is their culture and their anime, things like that, it's been for the better. So it just comes out as something that's so unlike other creations and so easily recognizable. The anime aesthetic, you see so many people doing that now and taking it their own way and doing their own version of their anime aesthetic, whether it's Russian anime or British anime, something like that.
I've often wondered that exact thing. I've wondered if what would Korea is definitely on the rise at the moment with movies like Parasite and music like BTS, K-pop and stuff.
Yeah.
But I wonder if there's going to be Saudi Arabian anime or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Nigerian anime. When is the next culture people are going to go crazy over come out? How long will Japan have such a stronghold on people's imaginations? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think about that all the time too, especially with areas of the world that just aren't thought about, like the Middle East and Africa. They're just not thought about in these entertainment terms, and it's such a shame because there's creatives creating there for sure. It's just you don't hear about it. So yeah, I'm always hoping that'll happen really soon rather than later.
Yeah, it's always what's that thing that's going to put them on the map? I'm pretty sure, incidentally, what do you call it? SNK is currently majority owned by a Saudi Arabian prince or something.
Yeah. The guy's problematic, I've heard. I think.
Yeah. It sucks because I want to play some KOF.
Yeah. I mean, would love to have more SNK stuff put out there. That would be awesome.
And it's so, you look at it the recent Samurai Showdown release I really thought it was great, even though the netcode wasn't there or anything, but that's fine. I don't really care. I like in-person play anyhow. But the new KOF and it's just oh man, they seem to be really rejuvenated here, firing on all cylinders. And it's is it because of this influx of cash from a very problematic source? I don't know.
It could be, man. I'm not sure. Again, correct us in the comments. Not sure.
No.
Oh man. Well, this has been a pleasure.
Before we go though, is there I would just want to open it up to you, Dino. Is there anything, that you've worked on that you are at liberty to discuss that you feel particularly proud of that you'd like to share?
Yeah, gosh, I mean, I'm proud of a lot of different things. There's going to be things coming up in the very near future that can't talk about yet, but I'm really excited for people to finally get a hold of those, just because we've been working on those for years. But most recently, the game Kokoro Clover Season 1 came out on Switch and Steam, and I was the sole translator, editor, and yada yada on all of that. So I was really in the weeds there, not in the weeds, but I should say in the thick of it. And I had direct contact with the creator because it's created by one guy, and there's a music guy as well. But the whole creative vision, the whole characters, all the dialogue was one guy. I was in constant contact with him, just the most ideal situation when you're the translator, so I could ask them all kinds of questions. Oh, is this a reference to a 1970s mecha anime I've never heard about in my life? That kind of thing. And so I think it really came out fun. So I hope people check out Kokoro Clover Season 1. It's on Switch and Steam. And it's like a playable anime. I truly mean that in that it has the time stamp in the top corner, like 7 a.m. to 7:30. You're playing 12 episodes. There's commercial breaks, and there's even like subtitles. Like the translation is in subtitles, and then the Japanese is in like a text box at the top. So it really has a unique feel to it.
So, that's awesome.
So you're saying it has dual language display?
Yes. So if you are a Japanese learner, you can kind of look and see, what changes I made or how I moved things around, because it's, not of course direct, not word for word, because language is an iceberg. It's not. The words are just the tip. Underneath the water is so much other stuff. So
I'm thinking extra content with this game, Mike. We might need to get into this and do a Let's Play, but. Yeah, I'm definitely interested to check that out. I really like the structure, and of course, I'm always very interested in. I like to see what games are doing that could be beneficial for language learners. So the idea of just dual language display by default is wonderful.
Yeah, it's great because it's an indie game too. I love supporting indies. I work, with the big AAA guys as well. And that is its own type of fun, but indies, you just see it is
very diplomatic.
No, I really mean that. I really mean that.
The words of the iceberg. It's just the tip there.
Exactly. You're a wordsmith. We can tell.
No way. Not after the pandemic. Jeez, my English has. Have you guys felt this too? Like you're talking so much less. Like my English, which is my native language, and my Japanese, just speaking is like, how am I awkward now? Like I need to.
I understand. There was a moment in Japan where I was asked, "What's denshu in English?" And I had been there. This is like my third year in. This is kind of tangential to what you said, I guess, but anyway, I couldn't think of it. I was like, I know what denshu is, and it's a telephone pole, but my English was not coming to me at all because I had been in Japan too long at that point. Not too long, but a while.
Yeah,
I've found that the pandemic definitely affected my ability to have more natural eye contact. It's weird because it's just like before the pandemic I would have very natural standard sustained eye contact, and now I don't. I was seeing hundreds of people a day as a teacher, and now it's like I see 1 to 2 people a day.
Oh man, yeah, it's affected us all.
So yeah.
Well, we're here now.
What a note to go out on.
Almost like it feels like we're in person. It feels good. Yeah, thanks again, Dino. This has been a pleasure. Thank you for being a part of our first season here on Gaming Gaiden.
The pleasure is mine.
We hope. Yeah,
that's great.
I've always, as you could probably tell already, always been into video games and Japanese stuff, and I have done some translation. I don't do it professionally right now, but at any rate, I've doing this podcast. It's just great to combine all your interests, right? So it's been really fun doing this.
That's great. Keep up the translation work, because translation is totally a skill, compared to just speaking the language and writing the language and stuff. It's totally a different thing. So keep up the translation work and go for it if that's what you want to do. I always encourage everybody to go for it.
That's awesome. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
All right, man. We'll catch you later.
Thank you so very much.
All right, so that was Oni Dino, translator extraordinaire. Thank you again, Dino, for coming on. It was a pleasure. Yeah. And we want to thank you for listening. And if you like this episode, please subscribe to us on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Music.
And if you really liked us, please become a member at our Patreon at patreon.com/gaminggaiden. There's 2 things that would really help us out. First, you could help Andrew get a little something. Could you tell him about that?
Yeah, so we want to support our retro gaming habit with this among, just hosting for the podcast as well and things like that. But there's 2 tiers. So the first tier is basically the $1 tier, which gets you the shout out, which will be mainly, if not only, on our Instagram, and we'll have a board of names, and it's basically like a tip jar plus a shout out. So that would be tier 1, the $1 tier, and then our $5 tier. There's a whole other show where it's not an interview series, but it's just Mike and I talking about different gaming topics, and that is at the $5 tier, and that is on patreon.com/gaminggaiden. And one of the goals is for me to get a something I've wanted for a long time, Neo Geo CD-Z. And Mike?
Yeah, and like Andrew said, of course, our primary goal is to make sure we can take care of the fees for supporting the show. But on top of that, we'd love to get these other devices. I would like a Mister FPGA hardware, so I can play stuff on the the new TV or my old CRT. I'd really love to put that CRT to use. I don't have anything to connect to it right now, and the Mister would be just perfect. I could play some Punch-Out with the proper timings. That would be nice.
And we'll hopefully do some sort of extra content around those 2 systems when we get them, thanks to your continued support. But always about the gaming, everybody, and I guess that's it. We'll check you later.
Thanks.